This is the Talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi Satsang, a time to listen, reflect, and deeply meditate. Know yourself and be always free and at peace. Welcome. I'm Richard Clarke, hosting this satsang. I'm reviewing and commenting on the book's Talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi. And we are in the middle of verse 27. Let me go to it. I have Ramana's words in highlighted in orange. So the disciple says, can a line of thought or a series of questions induce self-hypnotism? Shouldn't it be reduced to a single point, analyzing the unanalyzable, elementary, and vaguely perceived and elusive I? Maharshi says, yes, it's really like gazing into a vacancy or a dazzling crystal or light. And the disciple asks, can the mind be fixed to that point? How? And Ramana gives an answer that we've all heard. If the mind is distracted, ask the question promptly, to whom do these distracting thoughts arise? This takes you back to the I point promptly. Then the questioner continues asking, how long can the mind stay or be kept in the heart? And Maharshi says, the period extends by practice. The disciple asks, what happens at the end of this period? And Maharshi says, the mind returns to the present normal state. Unity in the heart is replaced by a variety of phenomena perceived. This is called the outgoing mind. The heart-going mind is called the resting mind. The disciple asks, is all this process merely intellectual, or does it exhibit feeling predominantly? Ramana says the latter. It is feeling. Then the disciple asks, how do all thoughts cease when the mind is in the heart? And Ramana says, by force of will, with a strong faith in the truth of the Master's teaching to that effect. And the disciple asks, what's the good of this process? Maharshi says, conquest of the will develops concentration. Conquest of passions develops dispassion. Increased practice of virtue develops a sense of equality to all. Then the questioning closes with this. The disciple asks, why should one adapt self-hypnotism by thinking on the unthinkable point? Why not adapt other methods like gazing into light, holding the breath, hearing music, hearing internal sounds, repetition of the sacred syllable like Om or other mantras? And Maharshi says, light gazing stupefies the mind and produces catalepsy of the will for the time being, yet secures no permanent benefit. Breath control benumbs the will for the time being only. Sound hearing produces similar results unless the mantra is sacred and secures the help of a higher power to purify and raise their thoughts. So, this dialogue is really about practice, and I think it is really about how to quiet the mind to prepare for practice, really. So after the first exchange, Ramana responds, if the mind is distracted, ask the question promptly, to whom do these distracting thoughts arise? This takes you back to the I point, promptly. Ramana immediately points back from the question to the questioner. He points you to look within yourself, of out with the mind externalized, continuing with its thought. Instead, to look where these thoughts rise up from. He points back to the origin of the I thought. These thoughts are about you. Who is this who from which they come? Where do they rise from? They rise and pass like clouds. Who knows the clouds? Who are you when there are no clouds? The questioner then asks, how long can the mind stay or be kept in the heart? Maharshi replies, the period extends by practice. The questioner asks what happens at the end of practice, and Maharshi tells him that the mind returns to the present normal state. Unity of the heart is replaced by variety of phenomena perceived. This is called the outgoing mind. The heart-going mind is called the resting mind. When asked something like, how long can I stay in the heart? The heart to which Ramana refers is not a body part. Rather, you could say it is the fount of consciousness and being within you. It is spoken of as if it were a place, but it has no location. It's locationless. This is a place for practice. Ramana says the period extends by practice. Practice is for the mind. Through practice, the mind gains the strength that it needs just to be still. With this, you're doing the first stage of practice, stilling the mind. When your mind stills, the second stage of practice begins. I call this diving within. You dive into what Ramana calls the resting mind. It's resting because it is at home within itself. The dialogue continues. Is all the process merely intellectual, or does it exhibit feeling predominantly? Maharshi says the latter. Ramana tells the questioner to look deeper than the intellectual mind into his own intuitive knowing, described as feeling predominantly. This is important. You will never be able to dive in by thinking about it. Maybe the thought starts the dive, but the dive is beyond thought. Intuition is the best word I know for it, but it's not anything that can be named with words. The dialogue continues. How do all thoughts cease when the mind is in the heart? Maharshi says, by force of will, with strong faith in the truth of the Master's teaching. What good is this process? Conquest of the will is for development of concentration. Conquest of passions is the development of dispassion. The increased practice of virtue means equality for all. The first is by mental concentration and control. These are developed by the mental disciplines of Raja Yoga and various Buddhist practices like mindfulness meditation. The next is dispassion, which is a reduction in the focus on this mind and this body as ways to find happiness, as ways to know what is true. This is a diminishment of the sense of I. The other way is with equality to all. This is the attitude of selflessness and selfless service and harmlessness. This is a diminishing of the sense of mine. These are all ways to prepare your mind so that it'll be less restless and get quiet. That it seems then it seems like the questioner is still actually in this dialogue trying to avoid deep self investigation. He asks yet more questions about how to quiet the mind and asks about adopting self hypnotism. He thinks this inquiry is self hypnotism, trying to think about the unthinkable. And so, why not adapt something like looking into the light, holding your breath, using sound or music or repetition? And Maharshi says all of this is for the mind. It may stupefy the mind and numb the will, but it does it only so long as you maintain the practice. These things, light and breath control and sound, are all mental exercises, unless somehow the attention is really turned within. Mantras and the like can help by pointing the mind within, but the real challenge is for the seeker to actually dive in. Thinking about practice, even with the best intentions, is not the actual practice. The actual self investigation must be done. The only person that can look within you is you. The only person that can resolve the misidentifications you've accumulated and find what is always true within yourself is yourself. You find this out in practice, not in thinking about practice or various forms of mental exercise. You have to plunge into your own being, your own existence, your own always present awareness. aware whether there is an object of consciousness or no object of consciousness, just consciousness without an object. Plunge into that. This dialogue shows the problem with the mind. The questioner is trying to find a way to deal with all of this through their mind. They want to make the non-dual consciousness existence into a mental object so they can think about it. My teacher said, let your inquiry be non-objective. The non-objective is something you cannot touch or find with your mind. You can find it, though, by knowing it and by being it. You find it and you are it. That's how you know it. You are it. Now we will listen to my teacher, Nome, with a Satsang discourse. Excuse me while I get it on screen. Brief thought.
What in truth are you? And what do you consider yourself to be? Who is it that so considers? What you regard as your identity goes into the fabric of all that is thought of. Beyond thought, what in truth are you? The reality of your being, which is of the nature of existence, consciousness, bliss, and is to be known as Brahman, is not contained within thought. You cannot possibly be a thought. And more thoughts, an entire bundle of thoughts, cannot be any more you than a single thought. More of the not self doesn't make for the self. And more of the unreal does not make for reality. Beyond thought, the unconceived, what are you? Beyond thought, you are beyond the body. That is, transcendent of thought, you have no idea of a body or being embodied or the I am the body misconception. Bodiless, you are unborn and imperishable. Bodiless, you are always unmoving, never the doer or actor of anything. Beyond thought, you are transcendent of every state of mind, waking and dreaming with all of their content, and even deep dreamless sleep, characterized by an absence of content. Stateless, you have no form, no coming or going, no beginning and no end. You remain attributeless, qualityless, timeless, and locationless, yet ever existent. Which thought are you prepared to call yourself? If you are not conceived, and therefore not the perceived, for the world is entirely within the mind, what in truth is your nature? If you are not thought, and not in thought, where is the distance or separation between your very being and self-realization? If you were thought or were within thought, you might say or think that thought can be an obstruction. But you are not thought, not in thought, the knower of all thought, yet unknown by any thought. So how could there be an obstacle or a chasm between the self, which is beyond thought, and yourself, which is beyond thought? Transcendent of ideas, thoughts, there is no duality, such as the self and myself, God and I. Indeed, how can one assert that thought even exists except by thinking that thought? Thought has no existence apart from you, of the nature of unalloyed, forever unmodified, boundaryless consciousness. Since your nature is consciousness and not a thought, how can you be bound? Since the consciousness is inherently immutable, how could it possibly give rise to an existent thing called thought? If thought does not actually exist, then all of the content of thought, from the subtle to the gross, from the idea I, down to the notion of an existent external world, similarly, all of that is unreal. That which is real is that which truly exists. What is it that truly exists? A thought about that will not suffice. To know what is the reality, what exists, you must know your own existence. That being realized, the reality is known. For the self is the non-dual reality. Non-dual conveys the sense of without division, and also without any alternative. So then, to realize your nature, all that is required is a deep, consistent inquiry as to who you are. One need not pursue thought. One need not contend with thought. One need not regard thought as real. Without thinking of yourself as this or as that, what in truth are you? If this is realized, perfect peace is found, and that is endless. That inconceivable perfection, which is absolutely one and invariable, without anything else existing whatsoever, is the significance of Sri Bhagavan's silence.
All right. Now let's take a few minutes and inquire, quiet yourself, and feel your breathing. Take a long breath in and long exhale. Notice that you exist and you know you exist without thinking about it or feeling it. You just know. This already is deeper than mind or senses, this kind of knowing. Now, inquire, investigate within yourself. What is your mind? Does your mind determine what is real? How do you know what is real? Is reality something that is transient? Or is reality always? Who am I? What is the nature of my existence? All right, let's close for this short chant. Om Shanti Shanti, Shanti, Om. Peace, peace, peace. All right. Any questions or comments?
Nome is pretty amazing, isn't he?
Yes, yes. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, after listening to Nome, it's just a tendency to silence and stillness.
Yes, that's exactly right. I think that means you heard him. Now, a small thing with Nome, after about 2015, his voice has gotten, real troubled by his Parkinson's. And I was
Right.
doing some experimenting recently with an audio editor. And I tried with a recent thing, and I found I could make his voice much easier to listen to. So that's going to open up for me another 6 or 7 years worth of teachings and satsangs that we're going to be able to use.
Wonderful.
Right?
And I think you're right, Carol and Richard. It's precious stuff. And, one of the things that I've tried to do for now almost 20 years is to be able to collect it and get recordings and make a library and use that library. Because again, it's precious stuff.
It is, yep.
Yeah, we've done an amazing job and I'm really grateful for it.
Well,
So,
again, it's the service that doing it makes me happy.
yeah.
So
And gives you
anyway,
extra brownie points in heaven.
okay, well, I'm just trying to build up my punya.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
Anyway, again, very good to be with you today, and we'll see you next week. Namaste.
Namaste. Good to see you, Richard.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Evelyn, did you drill a hole yet?
I'm gonna come bring you your yogurt.
Okay.